We are teaching tilt brush, and this lesson we're going to look at how to use color to emphasize light and shadow in a painting. So not only do we have ways of bringing out lighting itself in our scene, but we can actually use light and shadow to develop details that might not be there in the shapes we're painting. Emphasize things that the light itself might not be able to do. So I'm going to be spinning up a real sphere here using the matte hull, and then we'll be painting a fake sphere just so we can see how the light and color relates to depth and how we see things. So I'm going to get myself a sphere. First we spin it up as a flat plate, provided of course I can get the flat plate going. Then we're going to spin it up as a sphere, provided of course I get the sphere going. Center point. Okay. So we've got, as you can see, with our light and shadow. Let's get this guy a little bigger and back here. So we can see how the light and shadow lets our eye figure out how it's a sphere. We've got the light coming in on one side, shadow up from the other side. In this case, we can even see how there's a little bit of an underlight. The darkest is actually in the middle, and we have a little bit of that secondary moonlight coming up from underneath. So if I was going to do this with just color, not actual depth like that, I'm going to switch to a flat color marker. That way the light and shadow isn't affected by the color, but I'm only painting with pure color here. Oops, but I also don't need straight lines. So I've got my base same blue as we got as our middle region. Now I've got my color palette set so that my blue is the main area over here. So now you can see where the white marker is. That's the exact shade I've got right now. So if I tweak this, I don't want to just go straight into the light. I want to go up at an angle. I'm adding a little bit of white, but I want to keep some level of the blue intensity as well. Now what's nice is, in the color picker, we also have coming off the side, this chip over here, underneath color picker. As I move my selection around, you can see how it affects that. So I can find a good highlight. I can even compare, in this case, to get a color that's very similar to the higher value color. So when I go in my paintbrush and paint on here, we're starting to get that same quality in the light. And as I edge around, I can actually use this for comparison, so I can see when I'm a little bit paler, but not too obviously paler. So when I go in, it's not just a white glaring sheet, but we're building up those highlights a little bit at a time. Same with going darker. I can find just a little bit darker and start building up the shadow line, rather than having it come in immediately at this really dark, dark blue. I can build up to that darker blue bit at a time, so it keeps a little more visibly the shapes we're going for. So even though it's a flat surface, it's starting to take on the highlight and shadow effects that we've got going here. This being a rough example. Now there are a bunch of other tools that make some of this easier. So for example, if I'm going to do the highlighting part, we've got several transparent, translucent tools. So if I go for my pale blue, one of these tools is the soft highlighter. You can see the soft highlighter has a faded edge. It also builds up the brightness as you overlap itself. So if I came over here and started painting on my thing, I could have the brighter parts as opposed to the darker parts and build up again where the light source is coming from, where the shadows are going to be. Now you don't want to stray too far from the original color. You can see with our actual sphere, there's only a limited variation in the lights and the darks. The more variation you get, the harder it's going to be for the person to believe what they're seeing, even if they're using googly eyes like this. So we want to make sure that the colors we use are going to be natural. The other thing that might affect it is if we were going for a colored light source, so if I turned my sun orange, you can see how the orange gets picked up in the blue. It doesn't actually turn it orange. It's now more of a purple, blue with a little hint of orange added. So I could do a similar thing. I don't want to use a bright orange, but tint my blue a little bit more towards the purple. And that's going to bring me, let's use a regular marker here, that's going to bring me that slightly orange edge without tinting it, keeping the natural blue as the main base coat. So we can use a lot of color to either emphasize what we've got or to actually add depth and dimension that's not even there. So instead of my flat little piece right there, I'm going to take this sphere, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. I'm actually going to paint on this sphere and see if I can give it more than just spherical impressions. I'm even going to spin it around a little bit so we've got a good light source on it here. So I've got darker blues and paler purples. If I actually try to pick up one of those darker blues, I'm going to use my color picker and see if I can match, got to get a little more blue, one of those darker blues in here. A little too dark. But you can see how I can actually use the tool right in line to actually match as close as possible. Now I'm going to come in here and just give it a little bit of a impression like that. And again, trying to find matches for the color, a little bit more purple, a little bit paler, a little too bright. Try and match a little better. And then a little bit of the highlight. So as you build up, from a distance, it starts giving the impression, even though there isn't a divot in the side of the sphere, it does give the impression from here that it's not a perfect sphere. It could be the Death Star coming over the horizon, or something about it is no longer a perfect sphere. So using color to suggest highlight and shadow can be a very effective way to take a simple object, but give it a little more detail, a little more depth. So that's how we're going to be dealing with bringing out detail, not just using our light source, but actually painting them in as if they were real. Now when I zoom in and move this around, it doesn't look like it at all. When I move in, you can see it's just a couple of blue colored splotches painted right over the surface. But when it's back here, at the right angle with the lighting, it gives a convincing little divot in the back of the sphere. Do a whole bunch of them to make a golf ball or whatever. Now do a single stripe around the center, except this would be a dark one. So let's grab the darker color. And do a stripe around the middle. That's the brighter one. Give me the darker one. There we go. Now we have a Death Star coming in over the horizon, just using very simple color changes. So take your time, experiment, save your sketches, compare them, see where you can get the colors really working to really bring out more detail, more depth in your pictures. I hope this helps you guys. And the googly eyes, they don't come naturally with a vibe, but this is in celebration of our 100th subscriber. So thank you all for viewing these. I hope they're very helpful, both in your tilting brushes, but also in art in general. These are more of digital online art classes. So if you do like what we do, come back regularly. We actually do these things every week live on Twitch and archived on YouTube as well. And that's barely visible. There we go. So thank you for joining us, and have fun tilting with brushes.